Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy Langai again, and I'm just back with another video where I'll be doodling while talking. And today my main focus is on the topic of making things. So I'm just gonna write it down here and I'll get into it. So just gonna briefly cover this topic, sort of following on the previous video where I spoke about creative expression and self-expression. And I was just thinking about this as well, and it's just the whole concept of following on from just thinking about self-expression, how you actually make that expression take place. So the one big thing that stood out to me regarding this topic was the whole idea of technology being readily available. I was just thinking about it as well, and you realize that something as simple as a phone, for example, the amount of technology that's packed into something like that these days, it's kind of crazy. I mean, think about the amount of apps you get. There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them, depending on what type of phone you use. And it's interesting because the possibilities are kind of endless. I mean, you're always hearing stories about people literally starting businesses, making a living off something as simple as an app. Not just creating one, but also making use of it. So the thing that was on my mind was that just in terms of technology in recent years, the options are kind of endless in terms of what you can do and the amount of things you can create. I mean, think about it, and if you are musically inclined, there are apps for creating music. I mean, if you use Apple products, you've got your GarageBand and things like that. Yes, it's not the most professional platform to use for something like that, but it can work. It's something that you can actually use. Yeah. And then I was also just thinking about the topic, and you look at examples of situations where people literally are able to make movies on something as simple as like a cell phone. You hear stories of things like Wakaliwood videos being made in countries like Kenya, for example, where someone who might not have had access to that type of technology before can literally make a feature-length film just using a cell phone and a few things around the house. So just being able to use your own creativity is such an important thing in that particular case. Just drawing a light bulb there. So the other thing I was also thinking about in terms of technology is the way that easy access to the internet, for example, opens up a whole bunch of opportunities for you as well. I mean, it opens up sources for inspiration if you need it, a place to get information if you want to try something, if you've got a creative bug and you want to see if you can put it to use. There are all kinds of things you can do using the internet itself. I mean, you can even create websites and interact with people all over the world, develop things that, to be honest, weren't really possible maybe 20, 30 years ago, thanks to the way that things are developing and the speed of access to things. So that's pretty dope as well. Just drawing like a sort of Internet Explorer type thing, planet type thing. I think I'm also gonna start fleshing out some of these drawings a bit more, but I'm fine with these the way they are. I'm just gonna move on to the next ones. So yeah, I was just thinking about the topic, and then you also think about ease of access to things like gadgets. I mean, the amount of things that are available these days. Even have things like smartphones and smartwatches and even devices. I mean, we're talking things like drones, even though they are a bit controversial themselves. By the way, I noticed like you see a lot of no drone signs out in public these days. Seems like there are a lot of no-fly zones for those. So it's a bit of a tricky thing to navigate. But I just find it interesting when people do get the opportunity to fly one and like just start recording something. It just opens up a whole bunch of new opportunities where maybe, again, 20, 30 years ago, the only option if you wanted to get like an aerial shot of something was either to get to a really high floor in a building or hire a helicopter, for example. So something like that has just made new opportunities available for people. And I mean, it's not even necessarily just cases of filming from a high vantage point. I mean, people are doing all kinds of creative stuff with things like drones. You know, you get people who race them and things like that. So I find that pretty interesting as well. Just the idea that you don't necessarily have to use something for its intended purpose. If you're creative enough, you can actually do a bunch of other stuff with it. So far I've just drawn a light bulb, a sort of planet-like thing, and a rough idea of a smartwatch. Just trying to think. Just gonna like draw like a book or something like that, just to change it up a bit. So yeah, I just found the whole technology thing to be quite interesting, because that within itself opens up a whole bunch of opportunities already. But the one thing that I was also thinking about is that also just from watching a few YouTube videos and just like past experiences, I find that a lot of people stop themselves from making things even though they have a lot of freedom and opportunity to do so. I find a lot of people make excuses for themselves. So it might be something like they don't have the time to do it, or they might find another excuse, such as what other people will think about what they're trying. So, you know, avoiding getting embarrassed, for example. And I was thinking about it further, and you find people are afraid to make mistakes, you know, afraid that if they try something out, it won't work out the way that they expected, and maybe they might break something, won't go according to plan, and they might be placed in an uncomfortable position. But that opens up the whole discussion about needing to step outside of your comfort zone in order to develop as a person. So I'm just going to keep on doing this book. Which is another thing as well when you talk about making things. Don't necessarily need to just be talking about music, art, that type of stuff. It can be a broad number of things. The way that people, just going back to the previous topic, the way that people express themselves. We can be talking about writing novels, and it can even be a bit of more academic type of process. Just scribbling in something. So it doesn't necessarily need to just be creative as well. So one thing I found interesting in like the last few months is just the whole idea of the importance of things such as research, and they're not just limited to academic situations. If you find that there's a topic that you really find interesting, there's so many ways, thanks to the internet and technology and everything, to actually show that particular thing to the world, for example. Just doing a little light bulb type thing. So that within itself becomes an interesting topic. And the one thing that I found interesting was that when I was just following a few things and like reading up on a few things, the big thing that seems to come up a lot is the whole idea of looking past things like the excuses and all that, like fear of failure, things like that, and just getting started with something. So that can be like a really important, well, arguably is the most important step, because the thing about just getting started is that it sets off the process, and it's a term that I've grown to like over the years as well. The whole idea of experiential learning. And I think I'll actually make a whole video where I speak about this for a bit. But it's the whole idea of learning by doing, going through the process of actually practically laying out something, not just sitting around and thinking about the theory of it, sitting around and planning 24/7, but actually making something happen. And it's such an important process, because things like entrepreneurship and all that, to a very large extent, rely on that process of, make a few mistakes, try out something. Sometimes things work out, a lot of the time they don't, and that's also okay. I've heard a few people call the whole process, I think they call it failing forward or something like that. And I find that particular idea interesting. But yeah, I think I'm just gonna end this video because it's been going on for a while. But yeah, we've got a few little things, little scribbles on here. I'm just gonna throw in some random stuff. I think I'll try to focus a bit more on the shading and stuff in my next video. But yeah, I was just talking about making things, the whole idea of starting somewhere, applying this concept in a variety of things. You can apply it in education, any type of project you want to do. If you've been thinking about starting a business, for example, just getting started, making things, doing whatever you're supposed to be doing, not just sitting around and watching life go by, but getting into it and being a bit creative, developing, writing, whatever it is that you find interesting. So I think I'm just going to spend a bit more time in the next videos, doing a bit more shading. Yeah, this is pretty simple stuff so far. Might actually go towards drawing faces again. Sometimes a tricky one. That's one I used to enjoy quite a bit. Just try it out a bit, see how it goes. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and end the video there before it gets too long. And thanks for watching. Check out the next one soon.